The air in the nursery of Blackwood Manor was always damp, a chill that seeped from the stone walls and clung to the heavy tapestries. It was a dampness Elara Fenwick felt deep in her bones, a constant companion to the ache in her joints that had plagued her since childhood. She was the latest bloom on a withered family tree, a fact whispered by servants and reflected in the solemn eyes of the ancestral portraits lining the halls. The Fenwicks had held their land for 300 years by holding to their own. They married cousins, kept their blood and their secrets bound by the reed-choked waterways that isolated their estate from the rest of England. Elara learned her lineage not from a history book, but from the shared features she saw in the painted faces on the walls. The same long, delicate fingers, the same heavy-lidded eyes, and the prominent, almost severe jawline that marked a true Fenwick. Her tutor spoke of geometry and scripture, but her real education came from observing the world around her. She saw how the strongest lambs came from mixing flocks, how the sturdiest reeds grew where the river brought new soil. She noticed the slight tremor in her father's hand, the persistent cough that took her aunt, and the empty spaces in the family plot where infants lay unnamed. In the quiet solitude of her room, overlooking the endless, misty expanse of the Fens, a question began to form in her young mind, as silent and persistent as the rising fog. Why were the Fenwicks, keepers of this vast land, so uniquely fragile? At 16, Elara's fragility became a defining characteristic. While other girls of her station might be preparing for a London season, Elara's world was one of shawls, tonics, and quiet afternoons spent in a cushioned chair. Her mother, a distant cousin to her father, would pat her hand with fingers as long and thin as her own, her face a mask of loving pity. "You have the delicate Fenwick constitution, my dear," she would say, as if it were an heirloom to be cherished. This constitution was a litany of ailments. Teeth that were weak and crowded, a heart that fluttered like a trapped bird at the slightest exertion, and a weariness that never truly lifted. The local physician, a man whose family had served the Fenwicks for a century, would prescribe rest and beef tea, his eyes avoiding hers as he spoke. He knew, as they all did, that this was the price of purity. The family's pride was its unbroken line, a legacy preserved in blood and on parchment. But Elara saw the other inheritance, the one that was not spoken of. The crooked spines, the clouded minds of past uncles, the tragic stillbirths that were mourned with a stoic, almost practiced, grief. She was a living testament to their success and their curse, a prized orchid cultivated in a sealed glass house, beautiful in her rarity but too fragile to survive a single, harsh frost. Her beauty was ethereal, tinged with a translucence that seemed both exquisite and morbid. A rare visitor arrived at Blackwood Manor one autumn, a young naturalist named Mr. Thorne, commissioned to catalogue the unique flora and fauna of the Fens. He was a breath of fresh air, his cheeks ruddy from the wind and his mind filled with a world beyond bloodlines and property deeds. While her parents tolerated him as a scholarly oddity, Elara was captivated. She found reasons to be in the library when he was listening as he spoke of Charles Linnaeus and the systems of classification, of cross-pollination and the vigor found in diversity. One afternoon, he unrolled a large, hand-colored atlas of British livestock, showing her the different breeds of cattle and sheep. He explained, with an unembarrassed frankness, how farmers improved their stock by introducing new blood from distant shires, preventing weakness and disease. "Nature abhors a confined circle, Miss Fenwick," he said, tapping a drawing of a robust Hereford bull. "It thrives on novelty, on the meeting of strangers." His words landed in Elara's mind like seeds on fertile ground. She looked from the picture of the strong, healthy animal to her own trembling hands. For the first time, she had a scientific name for her family's plight. Not a curse, not a delicate constitution, but a biological principle. The library, once a place of dusty history, became her laboratory. She began to see the Fenwick legacy not as a proud, unbroken chain, but as a cage. The news came, as all important family matters did, over dinner. Her second cousin, Julian, son of her father's first cousin, was to be her husband. The arrangement had been made at their births. He was a quiet, sallow young man who shared her delicate health and the unmistakable Fenwick jaw. The union would consolidate the last two major branches of the family, securing the estate for another generation. To commemorate the betrothal, a portraitist was summoned from Norwich. Elara was made to sit for hours in the grand hall, wearing a heavy silk gown the color of clotted cream. The painter, a pragmatic man of business, fussed over the light, arranging her to soften the severity of her jawline and hide the slight thinness of her hair. He wanted to paint the ideal, the heiress of Blackwood. But Elara saw herself in the raw sketch he made, a stark, honest rendering of her features. She saw the familiar fragility, the shadow of her father's profile, the echo of her great aunt's melancholic eyes. This portrait was not for her. It was for the lineage. It was another link in the chain, a visual record of the blood's purity. As the artist layered oils to create a luminous, healthy glow on her cheeks that wasn't there, Elara felt a cold wave of rebellion. She was not a symbol. She was a person, trapped inside a gilded, suffocating frame. Her defiance began not with a shout, but a whisper in the dusty silence of the manor's disused medical wing. After the physician's last visit, he had inadvertently left behind a modern text, a treatise on hereditary traits and congenital disorders. It was a dry, academic book, filled with clinical language and stark anatomical drawings, far beyond what a young lady was meant to read. To Elara it was a revelation. Hiding it beneath her shawl, she smuggled it back to her room, reading by candlelight until the wax pooled and hardened. The book spoke of royalty in Europe, of hemophilia and madness passed through generations. It detailed cases in isolated mountain villages where certain weaknesses became endemic. It did not use the word curse or constitution. It used words like consanguinity and recessive traits. It had diagrams of family trees, mapping the inheritance of cleft palates and club feet with terrifying, logical precision. Elara took out a piece of parchment and, with a trembling hand, began to draw her own family tree. She marked her aunt who had died of a lung weakness, her uncle with the shaking sickness, the cousins who were simple, the infants who had not survived their first winter. The pattern was undeniable, a mathematical certainty. Her family's pride was a science of decay. The knowledge was a terrible burden, but it was also a weapon. It was the truth. Armed with her new, terrifying knowledge, Elara confronted her father in his study. It was a room that smelled of leather and pipe smoke, a sanctuary of male authority. She laid her hand-drawn chart on his vast oak desk, the evidence of generations of decline mapped out in black ink. She spoke not with the hysteria he might have expected, but with the quiet, desperate clarity of a scholar. She used the words from the forbidden book, consanguinity, inherited weakness, genetic decay. She pointed to his own tremor, a tremor she now knew her great-grandfather had shared. She begged him to see that marrying her to Julian would not strengthen the family, but condemn it. She proposed a radical idea, that she be allowed to marry an outsider, a healthy man of good but unrelated stock. "We are pruning the branches until there is nothing left of the tree," she pleaded, her voice cracking. Her father listened with a stony patience. When she was finished, he slowly folded her chart and placed it in a drawer. "You have been reading fanciful novels, Elara," he said, his voice deceptively gentle. "You are a Fenwick. Your duty is to your blood and to this land. Julian is a good match. This conversation is over." It was like reasoning with the ancient stones of the manor itself. He saw her knowledge not as insight, but as a symptom of a weak female mind, overwrought and fragile. The wedding preparations began. Bolts of silk and lace arrived, filling the damp manor with a phantom brightness. But for Elara, every fitting, every discussion of flowers and feasts, was a funeral procession. Her nights were haunted not by ghosts of the past, but by ghosts of the future. She saw herself in 10 years, her body weakened by successive, difficult pregnancies. She envisioned the nursery, no longer her childhood room, but a place of silent dread. In her mind's eye, she saw a line of small, fragile children, their faces bearing the unmistakable Fenwick features, their bodies carrying the family's invisible burden. She imagined a son who would never have the strength to manage the estate, a daughter who would feel the same ache in her bones. This was the legacy she was being forced to create. A continuation of sorrow, a perpetuation of decline, all for the sake of a name and a parcel of marshy land. One evening, she slipped out to the family chapel's small graveyard. She ran her fingers over the tiny, moss-covered stones of the infants, the ones marked with only a date. They were not just history, they were a prophecy. Marrying Julian was not an act of preservation, it was an act of creation. The creation of more headstones, more quiet tragedies, more treasured fragility. The weight of all the children yet to be born, yet to suffer, settled upon her. On the eve of her wedding, Elara made her choice. It was not a dramatic flight, for where could she go? She was a Fenwick. The Fens were in her blood as surely as the weakness was. An escape would be a spectacle, a failure. Her rebellion had to be quieter, more absolute, something they could not undo. That night, she did not pack a bag. She went to her father's study, unlocked the drawer, and retrieved her family chart. She took the forbidden medical book from its hiding place. Then she walked out of Blackwood Manor, not towards the road, but towards the heart of the Fens, towards the Great Mire, a treacherous expanse of peat and water where a person could vanish without a trace. The moon was a sliver, casting a weak, silvery light on the reeds. She was not seeking death, but erasure. By disappearing, she would break the line. Julian could not marry a ghost. The consolidation of property would fail. The direct Fenwick line would end with her, a final, silent statement against their legacy. She would become a story, a mystery, a cautionary tale. Anything but a mother to a new generation of fragile children. As she stood at the edge of the glistening, black water, the book and the chart held tight in her hand, she felt a strange peace. She was finally taking control of her own inheritance. Elara did not step into the water. In that final moment, another form of rebellion took hold. To vanish would be to give them a romantic tragedy. To stay, to refuse, to exist as a permanent, living obstruction, that was a truer defiance. She returned to the house before dawn, drenched and muddy, the book and chart left to dissolve in the mire. She walked into the morning preparations and announced, in a voice devoid of emotion, that she would not marry Julian. She would not marry anyone. The scandal was immense, a quiet, internal explosion that rocked the foundations of the family. Her father was furious, her mother heartbroken. Julian was humiliated, but Elara was immovable. She had faced the ghost of her lineage and had not blinked. She accepted her fate. She would be the spinster aunt, the barren end of the Fenwick line. They could not force her to the altar. In the years that followed, she became a strange fixture of the manor. She did not wither. Instead, a surprising strength grew in her. She took over the management of the manor's gardens and greenhouses, applying the principles of cross-pollination she had learned. She created new, vibrant hybrids of roses, her one act of creation a gentle rebuke to her family's obsession with purity. She was a living, breathing end to their story. Decades later, Elara Fenwick was the last of her name to live at Blackwood Manor. Her father and Julian had long since passed, their own fragile constitutions finally failing them. The estate, no longer bound for consolidation, was heavily in debt. Elara, now an old woman with a sharp mind and an achy but resilient body, oversaw its slow, managed dissolution. She sold off parcels of land to tenant farmers, the very kind of outsiders her family had shunned for centuries. Her final act was to bequeath the manor and its remaining grounds to a new national trust for the preservation of natural habitats, ensuring the Fens she had once seen as a prison would be protected. A young historian visited her once, seeking to document the fall of the great Fenwick family. He asked her if she regretted being the one to end such an ancient line. Elara looked out the window, past her vibrant, crossbred roses, towards the wild, unchanging marsh. "Some legacies are written in blood," she said, her voice clear. "Mine is written in what is absent, an absence of pain, an absence of sorrow. I broke the chain, sir. I did not end the family, I set it free. Her legacy was not a child, but a choice. It was the quiet, unseen triumph of a woman who had been born into a cage and had learned, not how to escape it, but how to let it crumble into dust around her.